She pulled away, and you noticed. You noticed every little thing. The slower replies, the shorter messages, the way she stopped initiating, the way she laughs a little too carefully now, like she's measuring herself around you, and your mind went somewhere dark. It went to rejection. It went to, she's losing interest. It went to, I did something wrong. But what if you read it completely backwards? What if the distance isn't coldness? What if it's heat she's afraid of? What if she's not avoiding you because she feels nothing? What if she's avoiding you because she feels too much? That's what we're going to explore today. Slowly, honestly, without illusion. If this kind of content speaks to you, subscribe now. One calm click. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to men who are serious about understanding themselves and the world around them. Now, let's get into this. You've been in this situation before. Maybe you're in it right now. There's a woman. There's something between you, something unspoken, something that lives in the pauses, in the almost moments, in the way she looks at you and then looks away just a little too quickly. And then something shifts. She becomes more distant, less available. Her energy changes. And you do what most men do. You start searching for the mistake. You replay the last conversation. You analyze the last message. You wonder what you said, what you didn't say, whether you moved too fast, whether you moved too slow. And quietly underneath all of that searching, a familiar feeling rises. The feeling of not being enough. The feeling that you misread something, that you imagined a connection that wasn't real. But here's the truth. Most men never get told. Emotional withdrawal is not always about you. Sometimes it's entirely about her and what she's afraid of feeling. Let me explain what I mean. When a woman begins to genuinely feel something for a man, something unexpected happens inside her. Fear arrives. Not fear of him, fear of what feelings will cost her. Fear of what it means to open. Fear of being wrong again. Fear of choosing someone who won't stay. Fear of becoming someone who needs. And here's what that fear looks like from the outside. It looks like pulling back. It looks like being busy. It looks like shorter messages. It looks like reduced eye contact. It looks like a kind of careful composure around you. That careful composure, that's not indifference. That's self-protection. That's a woman who is working very hard not to fall, because falling feels dangerous to her. Now, most men will interpret that self-protection as rejection. And when a man interprets distance as rejection, he starts to react. He pushes. He over-explains himself. He starts performing. He becomes warmer to compensate for her coolness. He tries to fill the silence with reassurance. And in doing that, he telegraphs something. He telegraphs that her behavior is working. He telegraphs that her emotional temperature controls his. And the moment a man's emotional state becomes dependent on her signals, something shifts in the dynamic. The tension that once made her curious now becomes his neediness. And that neediness confirms her fear. It says to her, you were right to be cautious. Not because you're a bad man, but because you let her emotional weather determine yours. And that's what we need to talk about. The man who doesn't do this. The man who remains stable. The man who sees the withdrawal and doesn't flinch. That man is rare, and he is magnetic. Not because he's playing games, not because he's pretending he doesn't care, but because he actually isn't threatened by her emotional complexity. He sees it clearly. He names it internally. He keeps moving. That kind of man changes the dynamic without even trying. Because when a woman who is afraid of her own feelings meets a man who isn't afraid of them, something quietly shifts. She becomes curious again. She starts to wonder why he isn't chasing. She starts to feel safe enough to inch forward because his stability tells her something her fear cannot argue with. It says, "I am not going anywhere, but I am also not going to beg." That combination, presence without desperation, that is what earns respect at the deepest level. Now let me go deeper. Let's talk about what emotional avoidance actually is, because most men confuse it with disinterest, and they are not the same thing. Disinterest is flat. It has no charge. It doesn't look at you and then look away. It doesn't smile quietly and then catch itself. It doesn't create that almost electric tension in a room. Disinterest is simply absent. Emotional avoidance is not absent. Emotional avoidance is very, very present, but it's fighting itself. When someone is emotionally avoidant, they feel the pull. They feel it strongly, and that pull scares them. So they lean away from it, not because they want to, but because leaning into it feels like losing something, like losing control, like losing safety, like losing the version of themselves they worked hard to protect. And this is where masculine identity becomes important. Because the way a man handles this moment says everything about where he actually stands within himself. The man who hasn't done his own work will take her avoidance personally. He'll feel rejected, he'll feel small, he'll chase, or he'll suddenly become cold. In return, defensive, wounded. He'll start performing indifference to protect himself. But none of that is genuine. It's all reaction. It's all driven by his need for external validation. The man who has done his own work responds differently. He observes. He stays in his own lane. He doesn't attach his self-worth to her behavior. He's not unfeeling. He's not cold. He simply has a center of gravity that exists inside him, not inside her responses, not inside her attention, not inside whether she's warm or cool on any given day. His gravity is his own. And that gravity is what she can feel, even when she's pulling away. She can feel that he's still there, still real, still not scrambling. And that groundedness creates something she didn't expect. It creates safety. The kind of safety that slowly dissolves fear. Not all fear, not immediately, but enough to open a door. Now, let's talk about what men get wrong about attraction. Because most men believe attraction is built on what they offer, their achievements, their looks, their humor, their generosity, and all of those things matter. But they are not what keeps a woman's attention. What keeps attention is something less visible. It's the sense that a man is complete on his own, that he has a world inside himself, that he has a direction, a purpose, that his happiness doesn't require her cooperation. Because when a woman senses that you need her to feel okay, something instinctual shifts. She may not even be able to explain it, but suddenly she feels like she carries weight she didn't ask for. And over time, that weight becomes suffocating. It doesn't matter how attractive you are. It doesn't matter how kind you are. If she feels responsible for your emotional state, she will eventually need space because no one wants to be someone else's entire foundation. That is a burden disguised as love. And a man who has not built his own internal world will unknowingly place that burden on the woman he's attracted to. He'll call it love, he'll call it devotion, but underneath it is dependency, and dependency repels. Now contrast that with the man who is genuinely full. Not arrogant, not unavailable, just full. He has things that matter to him, work that challenges him, goals that keep him awake, brothers he trusts, a body he's building, a mind he's expanding. He doesn't need her to make him interesting. He already is. He doesn't need her attention to feel worthy. He already does. And when she comes close, to him, she doesn't feel needed in a desperate way. She feels chosen. That difference is everything. Being chosen by a man who is complete, that is rare. That is memorable. That is what makes a woman lie awake wondering about someone, even while she's pulling away. Let's talk about that pulling away more specifically, because there are signals, there are signs, and most men are not trained to read them correctly. She starts taking longer to reply, but her replies when they come are warm, still present, still interested, just delayed. She cancels plans, but she reschedules. She doesn't just disappear. She creates distance and then reconnects. She becomes quieter around you, but in that quiet, there's an awareness. She's paying attention even when she seems distracted. She stops flirting the way she was, but the eye contact holds longer than it needs to. She doesn't bring up the future, but she asks questions about your present, who you are, what you think, what matters to you. These are not signs of fading interest. These are signs of a woman regulating herself, of a woman telling herself to slow down because something inside her is moving too fast and she doesn't trust fast. Fast has hurt her before, so she puts on the brakes. And if you respond to those brakes by pressing the gas, you confirm every fear she had. You confirm that you don't see her. You confirm that you only see what you want, and she retreats further. But if you respond to those breaks by simply continuing to live your life, by being warm but not urgent, by leaving space without disappearing, something shifts. She stops needing to regulate so hard because you're not threatening her peace, you're adding to it. And slowly, slowly, the self-protection loosens. The real thing underneath starts to surface. Now, I want to speak to something uncomfortable, something most men don't want to examine, and it's this. Why does her distance trigger you so deeply? Not just disappoint you, not just confuse you, but genuinely shake something inside you. If you're honest with yourself, you already know the answer. It's because you need her to respond in a certain way to feel okay. Her warmth makes you feel valid. Her distance makes you feel uncertain. And that movement from valid to uncertain, based purely on her behavior, that is the thing you actually need to work on. Not the relationship, not the signals, not the strategy, the internal dependence. Because as long as another person's behavior has that much power over your emotional state, you are not yet fully your own man. That's not a judgment. That's a truth that took most men decades to confront. We were never taught to build inner stability. We were taught to achieve external things and hope they made us feel whole. We were taught that getting the girl meant we had value, that keeping her attention proved we were enough. And so when that attention wavers, everything wavers with it. But there is another way to live, and it requires confronting the deeper question. Not why is she pulling away, but who am I when no one is looking? Who are you when she doesn't text back? Who are you when the plan falls through? Who are you when things are quiet and uncertain? Is there a man in that silence? A man with direction? A man with peace? Or is there just waiting, just checking the phone, just hoping she'll return and make everything feel stable again? This is the real work, not the work of understanding women, the work of understanding yourself. Because when you know yourself deeply, truly, without needing her reflection to confirm you, her behavior stops being a storm. It becomes information, calm, useful information. You see her pulling back and you think clearly. She's afraid of something. Let me give her space. Not because you're strategic, not because you read it in a book, but because you're not afraid of her fear. You're grounded enough to let it exist without it pulling you under. That groundedness is what she eventually reaches toward when she's ready. And here's the important part. Whether or not she reaches, you stay grounded anyway. Because this isn't about getting her. This is about becoming yourself fully, completely without conditions. Let me talk about self-respect now, because this is where everything comes together. Self-respect is not the same as arrogance. Arrogance is about needing to be above others. Self-respect is about knowing your own value without needing others to confirm it. A man with self-respect does not chase. He doesn't pursue someone who has made herself unavailable. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares about himself enough not to place his value in someone else's hands. He understands that presence without reciprocity is not connection. It's performance, and he refuses to perform. He'll show up clearly. He'll be warm, he'll be real. But he will not beg for someone's time or emotional availability because he knows that begging doesn't create attraction. It creates contempt. And contempt is worse than distance. So he moves with a quiet confidence, not the loud kind, not the kind that needs an audience, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from having faced himself honestly, from having sat in his own silence and found that he could bear it, from having built something real in his life, from having chosen integrity over approval over and over again. That kind of confidence doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt in the way he speaks, in the way he listens, in the way he doesn't flinch when things are uncertain. And a woman who is scared of her own feelings will feel that confidence. It will speak to something inside her that is tired of uncertainty, that is tired of men who collapse when things get complicated. And whether she admits it or not, whether she acts on it or not, she will feel the difference. She will know she is standing near someone real. Now, let's get close to the end of this, but not before we sit with something important. Something about patience. Real patience. Not passive waiting, not hoping things go your way. Real patience is when you release the outcome, when you genuinely stop needing a specific result to feel like things are okay, when you can hold something with an open hand, not gripping it, not squeezing it, just holding it and being okay if it stays and being okay if it goes. That's an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, especially when you care, especially when something feels rare. When you meet someone who makes you feel alive in a particular way, the instinct is to hold tight, to make sure it doesn't slip, to do everything in your power to secure it. But that grasping is exactly what breaks things. Because what's rare and real doesn't need to be gripped. It needs to be given room. Room to grow. Room to breathe. Room to come toward you on its own terms. And the only way you can give that room without going mad is if you're full enough on your own. If you have enough inside yourself that you don't need this particular thing to make life feel meaningful. That's why we keep coming back to the same foundation. Build your life, build your purpose, build your inner world. Not so you can become irresistible, but so you can become whole. And wholeness, real wholeness, changes the energy you carry. It changes what you attract. It changes how you respond. It changes the quality of every relationship you enter because you're no longer looking to relationships to complete you. You're bringing yourself fully formed to the table, and you're choosing with clarity who gets access to that. That is power. Not the power of control, not the power of manipulation, but the quiet, unshakable power of a man who knows who he is. And she can feel that even from a distance. Maybe especially from a distance, because the distance is where she tests things, where she watches, where she sees whether you fall apart without her or whether you continue to stand. And when you continue to stand, when you keep living, keep building, keep showing up for yourself without needing her to validate it, she gets her answer. Not the answer she expected, the real answer. The one that makes her reconsider her self-protection. The one that says, this one is different. Not perfect, not performing, different, real, rooted. And that is the man worth risking something for. Not the one who chased hardest, not the one who said the most, not the one who performed the best version of himself. The one who was simply, quietly, unshakably himself, whether she was watching or not. That man doesn't beg, doesn't shrink, doesn't misread emotional distance as final rejection. He sees clearly. He responds calmly. He lives fully. And in doing that, without even trying, he changes the conversation. He makes fear feel less necessary. He makes opening up feel less dangerous. He becomes the kind of stillness that a turbulent heart is drawn toward. Not because he's perfect, not because he never hurts, not because he has it all figured out, but because he has done the work to stand in himself, to face himself, to choose himself first, always first. And from that place, from that grounded, honest, self-respecting place, everything else becomes possible. The connection becomes possible. The depth becomes possible. The real thing, not the performance of a thing, the real thing becomes possible. So the next time she pulls back, don't spiral. Don't perform, don't chase. See it for what it might be. Fear wearing the mask of indifference. Emotion wearing the armor of distance. A heart moving carefully because it has been careless before and it remembers the cost. See it, understand it, and then return to yourself. Return to your work. Return to your mission. Return to the quiet, serious business of becoming who you were meant to be. Because that is the answer, not to her, to everything. If this spoke to something real in you, subscribe. One quiet action, no rush. But if this is the kind of truth you want more of, more depth, more honesty, more of the conversations men rarely get to have, then stay close. There's more here.